Welcome to Easy Agile's live webinar, Spot Roadblocks Before They Happen. Thanks for joining us. Wow, we have a great turnout today. I'm Kevin, a senior growth marketer at Easy Agile. We are an Australian company, and I'm coming to you from Sydney. Our speaker, Jacqueline, hails from Melbourne, 550 miles away. We have an interesting topic for you today, spot roadblocks before they happen. What are we talking about? Well, unless you're a one-person show, this exists in almost every project. Dependencies. We all know what it's like. We work in organizations where we depend on other teams to put the pieces together, be it a database update, a code change, UX design, or marketing support. We work with other teams. We are dependent on each other. It's great if everything goes as planned. We don't have to talk to each other. We don't need to check in. We don't need to know. It's all going to fall into place as planned, right? Realistically, we know from experience that's far from the truth. As project leaders, we cannot afford to not know when things will come together or when something is not going to be done on time, which will bring your project to a stop. This is where Jacqueline will share with you some great tips on how to spot those roadblocks before they happen. All right, over to you, Jacqueline.
Thanks so much, Kevin. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. For some of you, it'll be afternoon. For us, it's early morning. So appreciate you putting that time aside, and I hope you get some value out of it from us. My name's Jacqueline, as Kevin said. I am a senior product manager with Easy Agile. I'm also an Agile coach, and I've helped teams, programs, and leaders across various companies improve their agility for commercial success. And I've done this in a number of capacities, both as an in-house coach and as a consultant. So today we're going to be talking about spotting roadblocks before they happen. We'll look at why that's important, though I'm sure that's not a surprise to most people. The problems that arise in doing so, and some solutions. And I'll also give you some tips to get started. At Easy Agile, we make Atlassian Marketplace apps for Jira, and two of those products are Programs and TeamRhythm. And I'll be talking a bit about them today. They help organizational agility at both a program and a team level. They help us plan across both of those phases. Okay, so I'm going to start with a little story, which is why this subject is a little close to my heart. A couple of years ago, when I was coaching for a large organization, I had one team in particular that was working on this project, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with projects like this. It had dragged on for years. It was late. It was over time, over budget. It was a bit of a dirty word around the office, and no one really wanted to work on it if they could help it. The team that were doing this project, I was working with them on improving their agility to get better speed in their delivery and better outcomes. And they were doing really well with this. So they were breaking down their work into smaller slices. They were delivering higher quality, so they were getting less bugs and less support issues. And they were really improving in terms of their communication and their collaboration. And they wanted to apply these learnings to the customer and the project and how they were engaging with a customer. And they did so. So they started running daily sessions with that customer, and they would demo back what they'd built between the last time they spoke and the next meeting. And they would also get unblocked on questions. So anything that came up for them as they were working during that day, they would raise with the customer, get their answer, and get unblocked. So everything was going really well, and there was also this piece of critical work that they needed from a different team. Again, they did all the right things, and we worked with the other team. We determined what was needed, what the work was, and we got it put into their backlog and sequenced. So everything was going swimmingly, and time goes by, and as I said, they really got into their delivery rhythm. And gained momentum in terms of how they were working together. they were nailing it, and they were so excited. Unfortunately, what we didn't see as this team were going great was the urgent distractions and the shifting priorities that were impacting the other team and causing our critical work that we needed from them to slip further and further down the backlog. So suddenly everything ground to a halt and we hit a massive roadblock. We were ready to deploy, we were ready to implement, the customer was ready, they had people on the ground, and everything ground to a screeching halt. And we scrambled to replan while we were waiting for this work to deliver extra value, get some extra bits and pieces ready for them. But the damage was kind of done, and this delicate trust that we built up with the customer over time was suddenly broken again really quickly, and team morale plunged. All that good work that they'd done, they felt like suddenly was for nothing. It's a bit of a battle scar, in case you can't tell, and it's something that I kind of carry with me because it could have easily been a different story. And that's why I want to talk to you today about roadblocks. Roadblocks, they're something else before they become a roadblock. They're disguised somewhat. So what do they look like before they look like this and they send everything to a screeching halt? They're actually disguised dependencies, and those dependencies are visible far earlier than the roadblocks appear. So what happened in our project is that we effectively planned our dependencies, but we forgot to maintain a line of sight to them as we delivered, as we went into execution. And if we had have had that better line of sight, we could have focused on managing and even better minimizing them. So by the time we got there, they weren't roadblocks at all. They disappeared well before they actually became a problem. I'm guessing a few of you have experience with dependencies from things like big room planning. It's where we often encounter dependencies for the first time, particularly when we're embracing agile practices and ways of working. And it's where we begin to often visualize our dependencies for the first time. And getting this view is incredibly helpful. I don't want to undermine that, but the value of that view unfortunately depreciates the moment you leave the room, kind of as quickly as a new car leaving a showroom. And we all know how unfortunately quickly that value disappears. But why is that? It's something called the planning fallacy, which is we tend to plan optimistically and we have a good goal in mind and we've got a happy path planned. We know how to get there. The problem with that plan is reality has different ideas most of the time. So reality can really start to diverge from our plans the moment we walk out of the room and as soon as execution starts. And even worse than this is this. This is happening for every team in every sprint as time goes by. And that's between the big room planning sessions. If we were communicating well, then perhaps this wouldn't be a problem, but that's often also where things fall down. So what do we do about it? That's why we're here. Do you know that we process visual information about 60,000 times faster than text? So not surprisingly, visualization is a really key part in helping manage your dependencies better. It's where you will start to understand what you're facing into, what that dependency landscape looks like. And given the comment I just made about visualization and how quickly we process that information, there's a reason why Post-its and red string was so popular in big room planning when we were doing it in person and before we had digital tools. But it's time consuming to get these plans, once you finish planning, back into Jira, and it's easy to lose information or muck something up along the way. So using a digital tool to get that visualization can really help. Color coding, again, another visual tool, can help in understanding the health of your dependencies. And we use a traffic light system. So green lines on our screen mean that work is sequenced well and it mitigates dependencies in the way that it's planned out. But red means that there's some critical planning issues that need to be looked at, that things are going to get in the way. Those roadblocks are going to happen if we're not careful. So as I mentioned, we've come out of planning and we have this great travel map. We know our destination and we know the route that we want to take to get there. But what we actually need is a GPS. And our sprints can act as those in-transit updates for us. They need to warn us as conditions change. We need to have an updated arrival time and an updated duration based on things that happen along the way, like code complexity or customer incidents, the things that affect our best laid plan. And we need those duration and destination times to flex as these things come in, get managed, get resolved. So we're always on top of what the end goal is looking like based on what's happening to us in the reality of our day-to-day. And how do we do this? We need that same level of view of our dependencies for our teams in their day-to-day and focus just on what impacts them so they're not distracted by the work that's dependent across other teams. And this view also needs to stay up to date as they work their way through execution. This keeps teams on top of impactful changes that they might be making or that other teams might be making and gives them the opportunity to renegotiate these as plans evolve. Our TeamRhythm app gives this view of dependencies where teams plan, so where they do their sprint planning in their user story map. And it includes the view of the dependencies that were planned out at the program level. And it also uses the same traffic light system. So I can see how red and green dependencies might shift if I move my work around, if I have to resequence things from sprint to sprint. It can be a little bit tricky to see what I'm talking about on the screen snapshots that I've shown here. So I'm just going to jump into a demo and walk you through what this looks like in a digital tool like our programs and our TeamRhythm tool. What we're creating here is a space tourism offering. So quite exciting, obviously a very important project for the company in this demo. And as you can see, I'm in our programs tool. So I'm just going to close this to give us a little bit more real estate. What I'm looking at here is our program board. So this is the increment that we're planning for. In our case, it might be a quarter. And you see those sprints that make up the quarter across the top. And these swim lanes here are the different teams that are working on work items within that quarter. Here lays out the epics or the higher level work that the teams are all going to deliver or committed to deliver within that increment. And you can see these lines here, which shows me the dependencies that I have between them. So let's say I am working within the Teams in Space program, this team down here. Firstly, any dependencies with my team, I can click in and I can see who those dependencies exist with. And that helps enable conversations right off the bat. I can also use our dependencies map, which shows all of the dependencies for the stories as well. And I can turn off dependencies within my own team, so I just see dependencies with other teams. And I can also just home in on those critical dependencies that we might need to manage. So this is a really good way for you to get a view across the program, the whole program of work. If I am beginning my big room planning, then the next step is for me to go and work with my team on the stories that we're going to deliver in order to deliver these epics and plan them out before negotiating with other teams. And to do that, I go into my team planning space. So Teams in Space, this shows the epics that we looked at before and also the stories that we have pre-mapped out into each of the sprints for that quarter. If I want to see my stories a little bit more easily, I can close out the epics. So I'm just focused on the stories. And you can see here that I'm looking at the dependencies that I have between items of work in my own team. And this is across the sprints. Again, if I click into any of those, I can see exactly what that work is and what that dependency is between the teams to make sure I can sequence them in a healthy way to ensure a smooth delivery pathway across the increment of work or the quarter. I can also filter down as I could before, so I can just see the high impact dependencies that I need to manage, or I can just look at my external dependencies, which show up as this icon here. And what external means when I'm in the programs board is that I have a dependency from this work on an item that's either in another increment, so not being delivered in this quarter, or outside of this program of work completely. We'll see what comes up here. Okay, so that's in a different increment. That's in increment 2. Importantly, as I'm mapping out my work, I want to see the dependencies I have with other teams, and I can add these other teams to my view here. And I can see here there's an indication that I do have dependencies. So let's look at these two, the marketing team and the space travel iOS team. Suddenly I can see all the dependencies that I have here, and here looks like there could be a bit of a problem. So if I click into that, I can see that I have dependencies with the iOS app team, the space travel iOS app team. If I close that, I can scroll down as well to see those dependencies. So they've got some work scheduled for sprint 2, but they're dependent on some work that I have in sprint 4. And they're also dependent on some work that I have in sprint 3, also in sprint 2 rather. So let's go, and in real life or virtually, I can have a chat with that team and we can negotiate how we're going to maneuver our work to improve that dependency and mitigate it and make it not a problem for us when we're delivering. So let's say I've negotiated with them and they've agreed they're going to work to move their work out to sprint 5. You can see that the color of my dependency lines changed and they're now green. They're showing a healthy dependency. So we'll be able to deliver effectively with those changes in place now. I want to highlight one other item here. I have this item here in my second sprint, and it's got a dependency. You can see that link there, the green link. If I click on that, I can see that, whoops, wrong one. Let's click down there. That's better. So I need to develop a UI and I need the marketing team to have delivered on the logo before I can do that. And at the moment, this is looking fine. They're going to deliver that logo in sprint 1 and I don't need it until sprint 2. So we're sequenced well. Okay, we've got our travel map, if you will. This is our map of how we're going into that quarter. We've got it all mapped out. When I leave the room, all of this is already in Jira because these are Jira issues and they're sequenced in our backlogs under these sprints. And as a Teams in Space program member, I then go to my story map to see just the view of my work. And what I'm looking at here in my user story map is what we call a backbone in a user story map. So these are the epics, which are the user journey and all the things the user needs to do in order to complete the task, which is, booking a space flight. In sprint 1, I've planned some work, and sprint 2 that delivers on some of these epics. And you can see that my swim lanes here represent the sprints. And again, this is automatically aligned to your Jira sprints. And again, I can see the dependencies. And these are the same ones that I had between my work when I was looking at it in the program view. So let's say I'm coming towards the end of my first sprint and I've worked through all of my work and everything's on track for me, and that's great. So I start to look at my second sprint. I can see that I've got a couple of external dependencies here. And with some of these dependencies, they are with other teams that are planned well, like the one that we managed and organized in our big room planning. So this is that same item where I've got user interface and I need the logo from marketing. So I'm all good. I can click into that external link. And in the user story map, external means that it's outside of the team or outside of what this board is showing you. However, as we move along, as we know these things happen, if I go to the marketing team, and I'll just switch my screen so you can see the marketing team's view, they also have a user story map. And they're looking at completing their sprint as well. The first sprint is almost done, but they're having a couple of problems. They ran into some delays with legal as they needed to bounce things back and forth to get the terms and conditions prepared properly. And that's meant they're not going to finish all of this work in the first sprint. And that is where things might start sounding familiar to you. So they think, oh, you know what? We're not going to get to the logo. We're going to finish everything else, but we're really not going to get to the logo. They can see they have a dependency with another team, and opening that, they can see which team it is. So that allows them to call out to the Teams in Space team and have a conversation about the changes and the impact of those changes to their sprint. So they move, as they're sprint planning, they move their product logo work into the next sprint. Now, if I go back, I'll switch my screen back to my Teams in Space user story map. I can see in sprint 2 that I have my link again. When I open it now, it's updated and it shows me that that product logo has moved to sprint 2. So when marketing come and talk to me, I have that up-to-date information. And more importantly, if I then go back to my programs view, and remember this view where I was looking at all of the sprints across the quarter and the dependencies, if I look now at my dependencies with other teams, I can see that all my dependencies are healthy with the Space Travel iOS app team, so nothing's changed there, but I still have some risky dependencies with the marketing team. So as I scroll down, I can understand why. This product logo that was in the first sprint, because that's now planned in the same sprint, it's now at risk, which means it's showing up as an orange dependency line in my program. So I hope that's given you a bit of a feel for how the dependency lines show up in both programs and TeamRhythm and how they help you at both ends of that planning phase. So right at the beginning in your big room planning, and then as you leave big room planning and you go into your more regular, more frequent sprint planning, you're getting that same view, but you can pop between the views to stay across how your dependencies map to each other. We also have this dependencies report where there's a matrix view of all of the teams and the number of dependencies they have on each other and what that dependency type is. I can turn off showing healthy dependencies and you see those numbers update as it removes the ones that I probably don't need to worry about as much. So hopefully this has helped you gain an understanding of what I mean when I talk about visualization and why that's important. And I'm going to pop back now to my presentation and talk about the other things that are helpful to have in place to really get the most out of managing your dependencies well. So visibility is one thing, but if we don't think about how we communicate these changes, then it's kind of like ignoring a hole in the other end of the boat. We're all in the same boat, unfortunately, so that doesn't help us. Good communication makes us aware of these risks early, which allows us to intervene at an earlier juncture. And it allows us to adapt our program in small little increments along the way, which means that we're navigating these roadblocks if they do appear, but hopefully it means that we're removing them altogether because we've seen them really far ahead and we can get around them or take a different path. As well as communication, with communication, the way to do that is things like using your sprint events, like Team of Team or Scrum of Scrums to talk to each other between teams. but introduce dependencies as a topic within things like backlog refinement or sprint planning. If you're breaking down work, have it as a, also we should talk about dependencies. Okay, does this item of work have a dependency on something else? So just get it into your standard agenda list of things that you normally talk about in each of your ceremonies. Reflect on them at retrospectives. That's a bit of an easy one. The other piece of the puzzle is ownership. So we all know that something really easily becomes no one's job if it's everyone's job. So having clear delineations of ownership for who's going to capture the dependency, who's going to communicate the changes if anything shifts. Aligning on those kinds of things will also help you manage them as a bundle together. So with these three things in place, what you have now is transparency. You've got a view of your dependency landscape, and that is a really critical view that's really going to help you improve your team agility and your delivery speed. So it's really kind of where the agility rubber hits the road. So you need to be able to see the problem to then engage with it and be able to mitigate it and do something about it. So finally, how do we get started? It all sounds great, but it can be overwhelming to look at and think about how you first dive in. So we've got some really simple steps for you to help you with that journey. The first one is speak the same language. I don't know how many organizations I've experienced where teams are using dependency link types or JIRA link types really differently between teams. And sometimes they've got the same name, but they've got a different definition. They're using them in a different way. Sometimes it's just a typo and there's multiple that are actually the same. Sometimes they just use different words to describe the same thing. So spend a little bit of time, engage with stakeholders across the different teams and with senior stakeholders, and align on a sort of crisp, tight set of dependency link types that you're going to use. And the engagement piece is really about landing on a set that works for everyone. And that way everyone will be happy to engage with them and happy to use them. And then I think we all know good housekeeping gets you far. So spend a little bit of time cleaning up. You've got your shiny new definitions and types. Give each team a little bit of bandwidth to go through and clean out their dependencies and improve them and align them to the agreed set that you all talked about. Importantly, also have a plan for changing or fixing inconsistencies when you see them. So it might be that it's a regular topic you have as part of your scrum of scrums, or as you're breaking down the work, that you're making sure that the dependency selections are consistent. You can also solve this at an organizational level if you're able to go that far and set them in your global settings in something like JIRA, for example. And if I haven't harped on about it enough, make it visual. Using online tools like our programs and our TeamRhythm tools that work together to give you an up-to-date picture of your dependencies as they change and evolve throughout whatever your increment is can be really, really helpful. And again, this transparency and where the rubber hits the road is that it allows you to work on minimizing. And this is where you really start to elevate and enable your teams by removing the dependencies that they have within their own team and with other teams. So, for example, once you have this view, if you see a lot of dependencies that is between work within the same team, then you might want to look at how those stories are being broken down and how they're being split. Using something like the invest model is really handy, and all of these topics are probably separate webinars in themselves around good practice and how to get started with these things. But I'll do a quick cover off today. Making sure that you're using the invest model, it's focusing on the independent elements. So are your stories outcome focused and functional slices, vertical slices of what you need to deliver? If you're seeing a lot of dependencies between teams, then this means you've got a lot of handoffs between teams. And this is time consuming as work can pile up between teams. So making sure that your teams have as much capability and experience and skills within the same team to deliver their work end to end is going to reduce those handoffs. And that's where you're really going to be able to speed up with how the team can deliver end to end within themselves. That can be tricky in large organizations. There's often a few dependencies that are unavoidable because there's, maybe long chains of systems, but there is often ways to improve it and make it easier. Also align on your outcomes. So this is simpler than it sounds, but it's really important. If you've got teams that have different objectives, that's where those handoffs are going to really cause bottlenecks, because you're going to want your work prioritized by another team, but their priorities are completely different to yours. So having you all pull in the same direction around larger organizational objectives or business area objectives is going to mean that you're all invested in getting the same outcome, and you're more willing to negotiate your time to help each other out and collaborate on delivering the outcome, because that outcome's the same. And finally, all of these things can be applied in some way or another with external vendors. So look at how you can engage those practices with your third-party vendors. I think that's probably about enough to consume in one sitting. I hope I've given you some really good takeaways, emphasize the importance of visualizing, communicating, and owning your dependencies in order to manage them effectively and hopefully remove roadblocks before they even show up or become a problem. Also, some other key takeaways about crafting stories well and working on your definitions of dependencies. A lot of hopefully useful information for you there to help you get started. Of course, as I mentioned at Easy Agile, we create marketplace apps for Atlassian, and our programs and our TeamRhythm apps that I've demonstrated today are available in the marketplace. We do a 30-day free trial to kick you off if you want to evaluate these and have a little bit of a look. And they're pretty much plug and play for the most part, but we're also happy to chat to you about helping you get the most out of them in your trial experience. I think that's it for me today, and I'm going to hand back to Kevin to see what's been going on in the chat and if there's any gnarly questions that I can help answer. Oh, we can't hear you, Kevin.
Hi. Thanks, Jacqueline. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. We don't have any gnarly questions, but the first one is interesting. Someone asked, is PI planning in Easy Agile possible? If yes, please show us how to do it.
Sure. So I gave you a little snapshot of that before. In our programs tool, I'll just reshare that screen. Let's go back to our program here. So we're in our programs tool. Whoops. And this is the team view. This is the view of multiple teams in the one increment or quarter, as I said we do. But what I didn't show you was the program roadmap. So this is a view across multiple quarters or whatever your increment size is. And it also displays the dependencies that you can see. And as I said, you can select them. So you can turn them off if they're distracting you from a particular thing that you're doing at a point in time. But that gives you the overarching view. And so you see that transition as your work flows from one increment to the next.
Thanks. That's great. And this came up while you were presenting and showing the demo. Please demo the dependency visualization also. This is a great feature. Yeah.
No problem. So I'll stay in that view then that you can see. Let me go to, firstly, I'll go to the team planning board again. So again, I will just minimize my epics so that we've got a good space on the screen to do this. My dependencies here show me the dependencies within my own team across sprints. So if I open that, I can see the work that that dependency relates to. I can see the board that that's on. So it's the Teams in Space board and the increment that this relates to. I can also, the sprint that this relates to in the increment. And I can see the program that this work is part of. And this one also shows me the same information. I can see that this is in sprint 1. So what this is telling me is that I have an item of work that is planned after the work that it's dependent on. And that allows me then to shuffle, and it will update the color of that dependency as I resequence work for a happier delivery path. If I look at other teams, I can add in, firstly, I can see where I have dependencies here. And I can click on the links. You saw those appear and disappear as I selected the view. And I can see that this dependency relates to an item that the marketing creatives have and my team have, so across those teams. I have different functionality of dependencies in the different views in the programs tool. So on my program board, I can look at the dependencies between the larger pieces of work, so the epics. And I also have this feature here, which is the dependencies map. And that just gives me a little bit more flexibility about just showing where those dependencies are at a bit of a detailed level. And while I appreciate that this looks like a bit of spaghetti, that's kind of the goal, because what this should be showing you is where you need to readjust things and just how many interdependencies you have between teams and at what kind of level. I'll turn this off again. That's we're currently evolving that tool, so we're very open to feedback of what that looks like. If I then go into my story map, which is this little icon here for the same team, I get the same view in terms of dependencies. So I'll open my first sprint, which has a few more for us to play with. I can see that I have a critical dependency here. Again, it's the same experience that you open and you can see the dependencies and how they relate to one another. They're within my team across different sprints. And I also have the same feature where I can see the number of those dependencies and I can select what I want to see. What I didn't show you before is that in TeamRhythm, in the user story map, you can also select multiple link types. Just see if I've got any that will pop up. No. But effectively, I don't have to just look at my blocked ones. I can look at this. Actually, this is really helpful for when you're doing that first clean out. You can see all of the different link types that you're using. So that should help you with that initial clean out step.
Thanks. It's really handy to have filters that you can hide certain dependency types so your screen can be a bit tidier. Thanks, Jacqueline. A comment came up. It's not a question. Someone said, I like the visuals in this presentation. Hats off. So thank you. Yeah,
thank you.
very proud of.
We're very excited about the dependencies visualization. And I know, from my previous experience with coaching companies, etc., that it's a view that's really hard to maintain. I used to use a lot of wall sticking before COVID. So having that up-to-date view that people don't have to manage manually, I think is really helpful. We've only just launched dependencies in TeamRhythm, and we're really excited about it. It's enabled this ability to have that same view of dependencies where you're sprint planning, because you do that on such a more frequent basis. And we all know that things change from sprint to sprint, despite our best laid plans when we go into those larger quarterly planning sessions.
Great. I think that's it, Jacqueline. Those were the questions. So yeah, thanks again to Jacqueline and everyone who joined us today. We thoroughly enjoyed having you here, and the engagement, a lot of comments and chat in the room. So thank you for that. I see a lot of excitement among our guests. We'll send the recordings out to your registered email address and keep a lookout for it. And don't forget, if you're interested to take a deeper look at any of the apps that were shown today, you can reach us and we can set something up and talk to you about it. Our email address is hello@easyagile.com. hit us up. We'll get in touch. All right.
Excellent.
Thank
Thanks
you.
everyone for your time. We really appreciate you spending it with us today. Hope to see you again soon.
See you. Bye.